All right, it's after time for us to begin. We are still in Acts chapter 23. Just as a safety precaution, can all of you on Zoom hear me? If you can, just give me a thumbs up or wave. Or Gibsons, can you hear me? Okay. They were the ones I was looking at, and there was no response from them. So, all right. So let's go ahead and begin with an opening prayer. Our Father in heaven, thank you so much for the blessing of this day, for the opportunity again that we have to assemble. We know that there are some that are dealing with snow. We're glad that they can be with us on Zoom. We thank you for that, and we pray that you'll be with us wherever we are as we open your word this morning to study. Help us to understand the things that have been left for us, to learn the lessons, and to be able to use these things not only in our lives, but in sharing the gospel with others. We pray your blessings on those who are suffering from ill health, those that are traveling. We pray that you'll be with them and bring them back with us as soon as possible. Is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so we just got through the section where Jesus had met with Paul in the jail cell. That's chapter 23 and verse 11. We just discussed that. I'm going to get my water here. And the next question kind of dovetails with that in asking, why is this encouragement important and needed in light of what Paul has and will face? And thank you all for social distancing so well this morning. Got to be 18 feet between just about everybody here. But even though you're spread out, I'm still waiting for an answer, so.
I was getting myself situated. Which one?
Go ahead, what?
I was getting myself situated. Which question were you on?
Not question 11. Why is this encouragement that Jesus gave to him, meeting with him, why is that important in light of what he has faced and will face?
So that he knew that the Lord is walking side by side with him.
Okay. I think obviously the presence of the Lord is going to be really important to Paul. I think that it kind of portends an extended imprisonment for Paul ahead. He's going to be in Caesarea under two different governors for 2 years. The travel to Rome and being in Rome another 2 years. So he's right at the beginning of a 4-year time period where he is out of commission. He just can't go where he wants to go. Can't do the missionary work that he's wanting to do and loves to do. And so I think to a certain extent the Lord is kind of fortifying him here for that. And again, as Debbie pointed out, think about how often this appearance and message of Jesus would have been a comfort to Paul as he goes through those periods and looks back at this event. He's going to have 3 more trials. He's going to go where we're just about ready to see an overt attempt on his life and a threat to his life. And then the hazards of the journey that he makes from Caesarea to Rome, and the shipwreck and all of that. So the importance of it, because Jesus can see the future and knows what's coming, I think becomes very, very important here. Anybody else?
I kind of think that he's still, knowing all the things he did prior to becoming a Christian, and he says, I still have time to go out and save others.
Right. So, and again, the timeliness of Jesus' appearance here is that this happens on one night, the following night, and then verse 12 says the very next morning. So, I mean, it's just right on the cusp of what we're about to see. And I asked for question 12, describe the motive and summarize the plot in verses 12 through 15.
So you waiting for an answer to that question, or?
Oh, well, always. Go ahead.
There were some Jews who were so adamant about ending Paul and his perceived threat that they had taken a vow that they weren't going to, they weren't going to eat solemn oath to taste nothing until we have killed Paul in verse 14. And
Okay.
that was the threat in itself. That was the plot, and they were going to attack
Okay.
and get it.
So, and it says here that the next morning the Jews formed a conspiracy. I will tell you that it's my opinion that the Jews that are forming this conspiracy are the Asian Jews. The ones who hated Paul for what he did in Asia Minor, taking away a lot of their people and starting that congregation in Ephesus. The word going all over the place in Asia Minor and the whole region there. And they're the ones who started it all by saying that they had seen Paul with Trophimus and that they're the big instigators here. So I think that when it says the Jews, I think really we're looking at that pocket, there's that group of Asian Jews that want Paul dead. And they almost succeeded with the riot earlier, and in fact on 2 different occasions there. And I think that they have been foiled, they have been frustrated in their attempt at their lynching. The Sanhedrin was unable to even get close to a verdict because they didn't even really have a trial because they were at each other's throats before it all ended. And so how many men? About 40. That is your number again that we love so much here. There's more than 40 in this conspiracy, and they bound themselves with an oath. And the oath is, as John said, they won't eat or drink anything until they have killed, you can put in parentheses, murdered Paul. Now that means if they keep the oath, that means that if they fail to kill him, what will happen to them?
Starve.
Yeah, they'll starve to death or die of dehydration or what have you. The ironic part of this is by this murderous oath that they have taken here, they're bringing God into their crime. Because they took an oath to God that they would kill him before they ate anything. And that just really, to me, shows how accursed they are. That they would bring God into such an ungodly act in doing that. But in order for that to happen, they need to elicit the cooperation of the high priest and the elders for them to succeed. And so they want this smaller portion of the Sanhedrin because this is who they went to. They went to the chief priests and the elders. And so I don't know that all of the rulers are involved or the scribes are necessarily involved. Doesn't sound like his whole Sanhedrin to me there in verse 15. But because, and then in verse 15 this says, now then you and the Sanhedrin. So the idea is they're meeting with a small group of them, and when you and the rest of the Sanhedrin get together, then you can ask for this to happen, and that you, who I'm talking to, and the rest of the Sanhedrin can petition the commander to bring Paul down on the pretext of wanting more information. You know, it's a fact-finding visit. Go bring him down for that. Yes.
So, since they were basically going under an oath of God, I mean, obviously they're willing to do whatever, lie, cheat, whatever to get him there. But then they really, to their soul, believes that he has nothing to do with God, Jesus.
Right.
He is just the
Right.
false.
Right. They're looking at it the same way Paul looked at or Saul of Tarsus looked at the Christians, that Jesus is a fraud and Paul is a fraud and he needs to be taken out. He's committed blasphemy and deserves to die.
Because it sounds like under any means they'll do it.
Yeah.
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 Kind of ironic.
Yeah. John, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I'm just curious, I don't see anything about an oath to God, so what are you using to,
It says that they bound themselves with an oath.
yeah,
Okay, that would be to God. Who would they take an oath to?
just make an oath
Uh,
amongst themselves?
Yeah, I think as Jews, they would have made it, any kind of oath, it would have been before God. I mean, Jesus talked to the Jews. You swear by the temple, that's the dwelling place of God. You swear by the altar, well, God's involved. And I think they probably would have understood that. So, you and the rest of the Sanhedrin talk to the commander, have him brought before you on the pretext of wanting more information. We'll kill him before he gets there. Okay, so you'll be in the clear. We're gonna attack him en route to the above meeting. And it seems to me that the killing field then is going to be the same as it was before. That same little courtyard that's between the fortress and the temple itself, where Paul addressed the crowd and probably where the Sanhedrin met the day before. So outside the temple proper, but in its vicinity. Let me add here, let's go over to Isaiah chapter 54. And at verse 17. No weapon forged against you will prevail, and you will refute every tongue that accuses you. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and this is their vindication from me, declares the Lord. It's like the first verse of the battle belongs to the Lord. In heavenly armor they'll enter the land. The battle belongs to the Lord. No weapon that's fashioned against him will stand. The battle belongs to the Lord. They can do whatever they want. They can plan whatever they want here. They can make every kind of plan and plot. The Lord's going to be in charge of this, and he's going to control that. They apparently believe that the whole Sanhedrin is going to be on board. I don't necessarily think that was true, but they thought that. So any other comments on 12, on the plot and the motive behind it and everything? Okay, question 13 then. Who informed Paul of the plot and what did Paul do? That's in verses 16 through 18. Tammy?
Paul's nephew, and Paul asked a centurion, called for a centurion, and said, take him to the commander at some point.
Okay, so Paul's nephew, and then it was taken on. Paul told him to go talk to the centurion commander, etc. So the plot obviously became known to those who were not in sympathy with them. So word got out about the plot to people who were interested in saving Paul's life. The plot was, in my mind, no doubt suggested to and appealed to the Sadducees themselves here. We already know that the Pharisees would not be necessarily amenable to that, because we saw what happened a couple of days before between the Sadducees and the Pharisees. So as to who informed them, as Tammy said, Paul's sister's son, which would then be his nephew. That's in verse 16. And he's called there a young man in verse 17, called one of the centurions, take this young man to the commander. So he's not a boy, he's not a little boy. The Greek word is neanian, which is spelled Neanian, and that is generally viewed as a person between 20 and 40. 20 and 40 years of age. And that's all we know about him. I don't know where his sister is. I don't know if she's living there. I don't know if why the nephew happens to be in town. I don't know if the sister and the nephew are both Christians and have obeyed the gospel. Those are all really tantalizing questions that if you read commentaries, they'll spend pages talking about. The only thing that I can tell you is the nephew loved his uncle, has heard about it, and wants to warn him about it. It seems to me that, how does Paul describe himself in the Philippian letter as far as his political parties? He's a Pharisee among Pharisees, and he's also a Pharisee and the son of a Pharisee. So Phariseeism runs deep in the Saul of Tarsus family here. His nephew could be in town like Paul was or Saul was earlier, studying under a Pharisaic teacher. I mean, there's obviously, it seems, some money in that family. He could have been a student under a prominent Pharisaic teacher who heard about the plot. The nephew hears about it, and now he's going to go and warn Paul. And again, all of that is just speculation. I have no idea. I'll give you another speculation in just a moment. That just kind of, the thought of it intrigued me. But the account Luke gives us, as you're reading this is like a little novel. I mean, it's really interesting. It captures your attention. It's intrigue and a mystery. Why can't I think of her name? Agatha Christie could have written this. I mean, it just moves along so well. So the nephew comes to the barracks. It says he went into the barracks. Listen, you don't just walk into the barracks, okay? So when he got to the barracks, there would have been Roman soldiers posted there. And he would need to get by them to get to Paul. Apparently he was allowed in and in fact taken to Paul. Then the nephew tells Paul about the plot. And Paul then talks to who? Yeah, so he tells the centurion to take this young man, that's verse 17, to the commander, that he has some information. So the centurion doesn't know what's going on. He just knows that I need to take this guy to the commander. Did you have a comment, Tammy?
Yeah, just kind of a tangent on the speculating about the nephew. If their family's from Tarsus, that is Asia Minor, he may have heard about associating with some other Jews from Asia.
Yeah, that's true. So, anyway, the centurion informs the commander of what has occurred and why he was there with this young man. This guy, he came and he talked to Paul. Paul wants me to talk to you. So the centurion doesn't know anything about what the message is and will not, because what does the commander then do?
Took him by his hand and took him
Yeah,
to a private place. But I just want to make a comment right now is as the nephew starts to spill his guts to this guy, can you imagine what the commander's saying? Not again.
Oh, I know.
I mean, this is what's happening. And as we now progress.
Who is this guy? What is going on with him? That all of this is happening here. That's a really good point. So, and listen, if you're this young man and you're being taken aside by, I'm sure he's a little nervous about that. And so when you see that the commander takes him aside, I can see that as being a kind thing to do. Just let me just take you aside so that you're comfortable and you can talk freely, almost in a paternal manner there. And then he inquires into what the young man knows. And finally, the nephew tells the commander directly, the Jews, which I think is dealing with the leadership to some extent here, have agreed to ask you to bring Paul to meet with the Sanhedrin on the pretext of wanting more information, which, listen, that's exactly what Lysias wants. He's been trying to get it all along and he's never gotten it. And so he adds her, don't give in to them, and that's his own added urging there, because more than 40 men are waiting to ambush him. And they've taken an oath not to eat or drink until they've killed him. And in fact, they're waiting now for your consent to their request. So apparently that is either on the way or has been given. That last line to me indicates that perhaps even, this is kind of maybe far-fetched, but maybe this young man is the messenger that the Sanhedrin has chosen to take to the commander to ask them to bring Paul down. That would add weight to it because this is Paul's nephew. And of course that would give an air of honesty and sincerity and truth to it. What better way to get compliance and appear innocent at the same time than to send Paul's nephew as the messenger? And if that's the case, he's double-crossing them here because he loves Paul more than he loves them. And but then again, as I even put in my notes, there I go, making assumptions upon which I have no facts. Just thinking there. Okay, question 14. What shows the commander took the threat seriously?
Well, I put one that he took him aside, but, just kind of got him away from everybody, because or else he probably wouldn't have taken the time, is what I was thinking. And then, he, told him not to tell anyone.
Okay. So he doesn't want the conspirators to know that he knows what's going on. So again, as you said, he tells the nephew not to tell anyone that he's reported it to them, and then he dismisses the nephew. And what does, yes?
I don't think that shows that he was accepting this because he could have said, don't tell anyone, I'm going to let Paul go on with this trip.
Right.
So that in and of itself didn't say to me that he was taking this nephew seriously. But the next thing, when he calls 200 soldiers and said, take 200 soldiers and get them out of town, that's taken seriously.
Right. Well, and my translation dismissed him. Don't tell anyone you reported this to me. Then he called two of his centurions. I think it's just almost immediately. I mean, he immediately calls them in and orders out basically a small army of 470 men here, 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, which would be cavalry, and then 200, and I'd be interested, does anybody have something, what you have there for the second 200, what do you have for the word to describe them? Auxiliary? Spearmen?
Armed with spears.
Armed with spears, okay. The reason I'm asking is because it's a really interesting, an interesting word. The Greek means one posted on the right side or one who's right-handed, which is why armed with spears, that these would be guys that would hold their spears in their right hand. The auxiliary is interesting too. That's an interesting translation of that. I'm thinking, and this is just me, that these are 200 elite among this army here. They're kind of the right-hand man of the commander. They're the ones who are the most capable fighters. And he also tells them to provide mounts for Paul so that he may be taken safely to Governor Felix. And the mounts would be horses or donkeys. They don't have to be horses. It's not a matter of speed, because how fast can you go? How fast can they go?
As fast as the horse.
Just as fast as the soldiers can walk. So you're not going to be galloping away. And the fact that it says mounts for Paul indicates to me that he's also providing mounts for the people that are tending to Paul. And for his supplies or whatever would go along with that. As you read different ones writing about this, people who claim to be informed, some of them scoff at the number. and say, you know, that's way too many. That's, you know, Luke is exaggerating. Listen, that's still, if you have probably 1,000 soldiers in the fortress at this time, still leaves 500 in Jerusalem. The commander doesn't know how many. I mean, it's more than 40, but that's the guys that have just taken the vow. There could be a lot larger group of people who are involved in this that haven't gone all in with regard to that. And 400 of these fellows are going to come back the next day. They're only the 70 are going on to Caesarea. The 400 are going to be coming back. They are going to return back to Jerusalem. And when does he want them to be ready to go?
Immediately.
Third hour of the night.
9 o'clock that night. So they are,
Hey, Dan?
yes.
I was also going to make just a thought I thought about too in this is Paul being a Roman citizen. Also, if they did not take immediate action to protect him and something happened to him, they'd be in big trouble.
Yeah, and I read that too, and that is a possibility that this action is being taken because of the fact that he's a Roman citizen. Yeah.
That's possible.
As Otto pointed out before, this is it would be like the 4th time that he's rescued Paul from certain death. John?
Yeah, it's not a possibility, it's pretty definite, because it's in the letter from
Yeah.
Lysias Lysias to
Yeah. Well, and
Felix.
I know that's what the letter says, and Lysias doesn't get everything right in the letter, so it's got a lot of political stuff in it and self-aggrandizement. In fact, there's tons of personal pronouns that Lysias uses. That this is what I did, and I was, and I. So he's promoting himself a good bit in that letter. Yes, Otto.
Along with what we were saying, and sort of what Mike said, he took him serious enough to know that he's getting rid of the problem. He's giving him up. Felix is
Yeah.
not going to have to put up with this anymore.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah, and that's a good point too. He's just passing on the issue to Felix. And listen, if there's a group of people that just pass things on to the next person, it's the Roman. Felix is going to do the same thing with Festus. Festus is going to do the same thing with Herod, and then he's going to end up, because Paul's demanding it, going to go to Rome. I mean, just if you can pass it down the line, then you're politically that's going to be better for you.
Politicians.
Pardon me?
Politicians.
Yes, that's right. So we're looking at, let me,
There you go, Dan, sorry.
there's the pop. So there's a map. So we're looking at about 65 miles. Certainly not as the crow flies, because you can't get there as the crow flies. But from Judea, probably going up to Gopfina and over to Antipatris, which I know that they went to. Then there's another road that goes from Antipatris right straight to Caesarea. So we're looking at about 65 miles altogether. And Felix at the present time is the governor or the procurator. He's gonna serve in that post in Syria here, Palestine, for about 7 or 8 years. He has, according to Josephus, a reputation for being ruthless. Suetonius says of Felix that he had 3 wives in succession, so he didn't have 3 wives at one time. The first 2 were both named Drusilla. He was married to a Drusilla, then I guess he liked Drusilla enough that he married another Drusilla, and then I don't know what the name of the 3rd wife was. It's the second Drusilla that we will be looking at here, and we'll talk about her a little bit later. So apparently the commander's taking this very seriously, has a small army taking Paul up to Caesarea. So then question 15, what did Claudius Lysias do?
Sent Paul to Felix and wrote a letter accompanying.
Okay, so he didn't go with him. He stays in Jerusalem, but he wrote a letter explaining why Paul was being sent to him. And listen again, as I'm reading around the study, people say, well, how did Luke manage to get because as you read this, I mean, it looks like he got a photocopy, took a picture of the letter so he could write it into the book of Acts here. So how did he manage to get the contents of the letter? It could have been read when Paul got there to Caesarea. It could have been read out loud. I don't know that when it says Felix read it, that he actually read it. He could have had some scribe or some person read it for him. Felix could have divulged the information to Paul and said, here's what he wrote. And no one doubts that either one or both of them, Luke or Paul, have heard what, or could have heard what was being read. The interesting thing, and it always amazes me, as I'm reading these people are questioning how this could happen, and maybe it's because of what their understanding is, but there's another person involved in the writing of the book of Acts called the Holy Spirit. And if he wanted to tell Luke exactly word for word what was written in there, he would have. I mean, that's what inspiration is about, is making sure that what's written is accurate, that is correctly there. But again, so we have this letter given to us in the text. So question 16 then is, what do you think of the letter Claudius Lysias wrote to Felix? And again, whenever you see a question where I say, what do you think? You cannot be wrong, because that's what you think. Okay?
Question.
Okay?
Okay. The commander assembled his army to take Paul away in the middle of the night, which I assume maybe I shouldn't do. But they left at night under the cover of darkness.
Right.
And I often wondered, just recently when I read it again, that he informed those Jews what he was doing. I don't think he told them right away.
No. No.
So they were well on their way before the Jews found out that he was aware of the problem, and he better not show up to do it.
I'm guessing as far as the timeline goes, the Jews have, because it says the next morning, they are the ones at that point in time that they approach the Sanhedrin, or part of it, tell them about what they want to do. So in the context of that, from that time period in the morning, the nephew probably meets with Paul and Claudius Lysias in the early afternoon. And so then they begin to assemble this army and escort, and he wants them to leave at 9 o'clock. So this is all that same day. And I think you're right. He wants to go there while it's dark, and that makes it a lot easier to leave. And so, but he's also, and I had not paid attention to that because Lysias says, "I also ordered the accusers to present to you their case against him." Claudius could have written that prior to the fact of telling them that, knowing that he had a couple of days before Felix would get the letter, and by the time Felix reads it, he would have already told them that they need to go up there. So there's that little time envelope there. So back to, yes, John.
One of the other things I thought was interesting in the letter that you were probably alluding to earlier, one of the inaccuracies was in his self-aggrandizement. Claudius Lysias says that he rescued Paul when he learned he was a Roman.
Right.
But he didn't learn he was a Roman until after he rescued him and was about to scourge him
Right.
for information.
Right. Yeah. So, and again, I used to, when I've taught this in the past, I used to be just absolutely, and just horrible to Claudius Lysias. I mean, I just really excoriated him in my studies. But in the main, he seems to be accurate as he's looking at things from his point of view, which is really, as he's looking at what he's done, he's obviously got some rose-colored glasses on. But did he rescue him? Yes. Did he give him some special treatment as a Roman citizen? Yes. Did he bring them before the Sanhedrin to learn what and found out that the charges were mostly religious? Because at the end of that discussion, as far if we can call it a discussion, it happened to be over the resurrection. He gathered that, so it would have to be something based on their religious laws. He certainly learned about the plot against him, and he's sending him to the governor, and he will send the accusers there. So, in the main, it's pretty accurate, but it is very definitely skewed. Sam?
Roger, I think, was trying to get your attention.
Okay.
Still there,
Go
Roger?
ahead, Roger.
Yeah, hey, Dan, we also see that God is doing exactly what he told Paul, and he's also using the enemy of the Jews to deliver him from their death threat.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Otto?
Just another one of my little speculations is everything that I see that Claudius did was for Claudius' benefit, his own benefit.
Right.
I mean, nothing there was for Paul. It was everything to save himself,
Yeah.
is what I.
Yeah. Well, and so giving him the benefit of the doubt, you know, that he is doing what most everybody does with regard to feathering their own nest. He has manipulated the facts. John mentioned this. For instance, the discovery of his citizenship was after the first two rescues. The second one was after Paul's speech. But also after he had trussed him up and getting ready to beat the tar out of him to learn the truth, to torture him to get the truth. And of course, that's not mentioned that he did that. And as I mentioned a minute ago, there's 9 verbs in this letter. All of them are first person. And so the content appears to be fairly political. It pretty much makes Claudius Lysias look like a hero of saving one of the emperor's citizens, rather than a guy who kind of just tripped through the whole procedure trying to find his way and really accidentally came on to most of this information. Anyway, that's the best and the worst that I can say about this letter. Any other comments on that? Tammy?
Another thought is that I don't think this is anything other than what Felix or another governor would expect from a commanding officer.
Right.
Because if he's deprecating in some way, it's like, okay, how did you mess up that you're confessing
Right.
this?
Yeah, Felix is not going to dig in to see whether the facts are true or not. So describe the journey of Paul to Caesarea in verses 31 through 33. What does anybody have for that?
I wrote pretty uneventful in that they just.
Yeah. Yep. When it says that they carried out his orders, so the soldiers carrying out his orders, indicates to me what time did they leave? 9 o'clock. That was the time they were ordered to leave. They took Paul during the night to Antipatris, and you can see where Antipatris is on the map right here. And Tim, I need to forward my thing again.
There you go.
So this is a caravansary. A caravansary is a walled-in place where caravans who are traveling from one place to the other can come in and have protection during the night. Pretty good size area that's still there, and of course there's their. It's not the theater, but yes, it is, because you can see the grass, the terraces up there. So that's those are the only things. I've shown you so many times Caesarea in the last few months on different classes. You're going to have to just remember what those look like. So they took Paul to Antipatris, and let's see. I thought I had. At this point, all of the foot soldiers go back. All 400 of them return back to Jerusalem, and the cavalry is the ones that are going to take Paul on to Caesarea. So let me just tell you a little bit about Antipatris. It's the same as in the Old Testament as Aphek, A-P-H-E-K. Aphek is where the Philistines captured the ark during the time of Eli, when it was taken and Eli died. That's in 1 Samuel, the 4th chapter. And you read about Aphek a number of other times in the Old Testament. Herod the Great rebuilt Aphek and named it Antipatris after his father, who was Antipater. So Herod the Great's father was Antipater. He names this city after him. And apparently they all stayed the night there and went on to Caesarea the next day. And so last question, what did Felix do when Paul arrived?
Put him up in a nice hotel.
Yeah, sure.
No, I mean, isn't that, they did put him into the,
Mansion, into the palace.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when they delivered Paul and the letter to Felix, having discovered, for whatever reason, Felix discovered that Paul was from Cilicia, which would be kind of in his bailiwick there, Felix agreed to then hear his case. And he set the time for a meeting with Paul when those from Jerusalem, which would be Paul's accusers from them, arrived. And when was that? 5 days later, from chapter 24 and verse 1. And then we are told he was kept under guard in Herod's palace. Herod's palace is the same as the governor's mansion. It's where Felix and Festus and all of them live. That's their residence. And the fact that it says he's under guard, the fact that he's a Roman citizen, I think pulls into this, because I would say that this is a house arrest. In other words, he's free to move around the mansion. There's no manacles, there's no chains on him here. He just can't leave the palace. He's not allowed to leave that. And part of that is because he's an uncharged Roman. There's no charges have been leveled against him. And so my last words there then would be, I can assume that Paul, at least at this point in time, is not being ill-treated. Okay. So next week we'll start chapter 24. I already sent you the lesson sheets for that. And at the beginning of class next week, we'll go through the chapter themes up through chapter 24. Listen, you've only got 5 more to learn. 5 more to memorize. So, yes?
Just one question. Why, and this is again for us to speculate, why do you think he asked you where he was from?
I think he wants to know whether he's in his bailiwick. I think that he would like nothing better than to do what we talked about before, and that's pass on this responsibility to somebody else. But because he's from Cilicia, okay, you fall underneath my jurisdiction, and so I will hear your case.
I think it might have been too to verify to himself that he was in fact a Roman.
Well, yeah, because Cilicia was no mean city. It was a Roman city. Yeah. All right. Thank you all very much.